Hey, this is Joel Albrecht, Jolie Schmoly, Puddin' and Pie from Were You Still Talking? I just did a podcast and I guess I was a little tired. Everything kind of went wrong. I was trying to do my first video podcast, even though it's going to be an audio podcast. It's still going to be in all the places that you normally get my podcast, Were You Still Talking? But it also, I was going to put a video up so you could see eventually what it'll look like, because I want to do my podcast live to video, etc., etc. So I was using, I showed people my board, and I had the Pro Tools going and all this stuff. I'm shooting on a camera. The camera, I thought, the Canon, would go for 29 minutes without stopping, and then and I've got some lights up here, and I had the mic up here. Many problems, many big problems. One, I was like this in the mic, so all you could see was this really terrible image. So the video is kind of terrible in that way. I know this is too busy back here, but I already know that it's just my equipment, it's just my studio. It's too much, it's too behind the scenes. I was actually behind the mic and you couldn't see me at all. So I'm just letting you know, it's not the best video in the world. It's simply what it looks like when I'm doing a podcast. And what else was I going to talk about? Oh yeah, so I record the thing. The camera shuts off at 11 minutes because it doesn't go 29 minutes. It goes 4 gigabytes. So 4 gigabytes or 29 minutes. So if you're recording in full HD, then that's too much. And then I look around at the end, I'm all done, and I look around, and oh, I had highlighted a piece of Pro Tools, so it only recorded about 3 minutes. So I had 3 minutes of the Pro Tools recording, but I remembered to back up to Behringer. So the Behringer recording is not bad at all. So I'm still going to have a podcast. And now check out the video. So welcome to the podcast. This one's going to be a little different. I'm actually videotaping this just as an experiment to see what it's going to be like in my final iteration, which I hope to be live on YouTube. But that's going to take a bit of planning and more resources and blah, blah, blah. So right now I'm got some lights set up. There's going to be a picture of it somewhere, and we can check that out. I'm back on the Perception mic for those following along, wondering how I'm doing my podcast. I'm putting a little bit more of that in. I am, as I say, recording this. I have a little timer because the camera I'm using has a maximum recording of 29 minutes and 29 seconds or something like that. I don't know why. I've always thought it's very strange. But if you're listening along on the regular podcast sources, who cares? Got quite a setup here. Have my little iPad that I'm using to control the board. The board is behind me, which I'm showing people on the video. There it is. It's an X32 rack, which is a nice little compact unit. Totally unnecessary for a podcast, but I got it for drum recording. You can check out all my drum recordings on my YouTube site. So when you're on the podcast on YouTube, you can just go up to the corner where my picture is and click on that and see the other incredibly interesting videos on my site. So here I am. I'm doing a solo show. My guest today is Joel Albrecht. Hey, Joel, how you doing? Oh, pretty good. Anyway, so enough of that. I was thinking of doing a Russell Brand type rant, but when I do it in my head, it sounds so much better than I think it would come across on an actual podcast. So a little bit about me, a little bit why it takes so long for me to do podcasts. I take a lot of time between podcasts, not because I'm trying to pace myself, but that's always good too, but because I've been having these weird problems with my head and my eyes about January, so 5 months ago. Suddenly, I got really dizzy, couldn't look at my flight simulator anymore. I do a lot of flight simulating. I was just starting to do flight simulator videos, really getting into that, just starting to. And suddenly, I got seasick when I looked at computers. I mean, really just like that, right off the bat. No warning, nothing like that. I've now been to 5 different doctors. I've had an MRI, all kinds of blood tests. Unfortunately, what I did find out is that I'm fairly healthy. There's nothing they can see wrong with me. I guess that's supposed to be good news. The hypothesis is that I got some kind of infection on my inner ear, and really the only symptoms were the ones I described. So I got this all set up yesterday, which took me a minute because I'm a one-man crew. Got this all set up, ready to go for the video podcast, and I couldn't do it. Couldn't do it at all. My head just started throbbing. If I concentrated on anything, it would just make me nuts. It just felt like my head was going to explode. It's kind of hard to explain. It feels like there's bugs crawling into my brain or something. So if there was an actual Dr. Shepard in the world, that'd be great. He could get a hold of me and tell me what's wrong. Unfortunately, if the physicians are correct, it's just going to take time. It's really hard to be patient with something like this. But anyway, so when and it's especially hard because I would really like to audition tomorrow. There's an awesome play going on at the Very Little Theater, and I'm going to have to miss it. And it's extremely unfortunate. My back is finally starting to get a little bit better so that I can do some things. Unfortunately, it's not enough better to audition for this incredible band that I just saw an audition for yesterday. One of the few local bands that have done really well. So supposedly people like personal stories. That's what I've heard. So that's part of my personal story. I won't go into the rest right now because on my next podcast, there might be a lot more of it. I do have some, I'm not going to have to do podcasts by myself for long. I'm only doing this because I'm a little bit impatient, and the guests I have lined up won't be here until a few days from now. And the other guests that I have tentatively lined up, I haven't exactly, contacted yet. So that slows things down too. Because when I start feeling really weird, it's hard to contact people and say, hey, you want to do a podcast? When? I have no idea. Sometime, someday. Still might work. I don't know. I'll get some more people. But I do have some folks lined up. Much more exciting stuff. And also, I'm zeroing in on what the podcast is about. I know this was a question at first, and it's been a question. I'm hoping it becomes about who we really are. The world at large, the universe, consciousness. Are we the people we see walking down the street? Are we the people other people see? We really can't be, because everyone sees someone different. It's an interesting theory that I heard recently, that everyone that runs into you, or passes you on the street, or you've known for years and years and years, they all see a different person. I'm not breathing. I'm holding my breath because I'm staring at my image and it's making me nervous. Strange. Okay, I'll just imagine there's no camera. So we all see a different person for everyone we meet. So your cousins and your sister and people on the street all see someone else, which is interesting. And I thought about it and I thought, well, I'm sure that's very true. And none of us see the person that we probably think we are. And of course, day to day, I think even the person we think we are changes. So it's, and the person we really are, that's a whole nother story, a whole nother universe. Like, where do we come from? Where do we go to when we die or pass away? I've heard a lot of theories on that. I have my own beliefs on that, but I want to hear others. I don't think that life ends at death. The reason my voice is cracking a little because I've had to deal with that very recently, both for myself and for others, and seeing others who are very close to the end of life. For myself, it was only, I'd say, 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago, where I was in a very dark place, and was, I wouldn't say considering suicide, but thinking and having suicidal thoughts. and really not knowing why it was worth going on. I guess that's the only way I can put it. My back pain was severe. I could do nothing with the dizziness. The symptoms of the dizziness had me so I couldn't work. I couldn't. I mean, if I could sit home and watch TV, that would have been okay, but I couldn't. Couldn't really watch TV. I listened to a lot of books on tapes. I then fell into podcasts and some idiots, Joe Rogan and Kevin Smith, suggested that anyone could start a podcast. So here I am trying. What I'm noticing on this podcast is that the time goes much slower when it's just me trying to come up with things to say. I was so much better when I was just walking around the house thinking about it. Does consciousness come from the brain? That's a very interesting theory, very interesting thought. Does consciousness come from the brain? That's an idea I'd like to explore. I'd like to hear other people's thoughts on, opinions. Their science is, I don't think science knows. I think science is still trying to figure that out. I think that's one of the things neurologists are not 100% sure on. If they are sure, they think, well, of course it comes from the brain. But there's some evidence that that's not really true. And so where consciousness comes from is a big puzzle, and it opens up a lot of possibilities, The other thing I'm wanting to do with this podcast is to focus on things other than the news. I could talk about the news all day long. I could get into the angry rant world because I'm full of angry rants. It's actually so simple. That's why so many people do it. That's because another reason so many people do it is because it sells really well. Unfortunately, in today's modern media, what really sells are angry rants. And so if you have angry rants that are news related, well, that's even easier because the news is so easy to get angry about no matter which side of certain things you're on, which side of the table, so to speak. And I've been on one side of the table for a long, long time, and I'm starting to question, is it what's actually going to, change the world? Obviously, politics, which is what the news is mostly about, does have lasting influence and does change things a lot. But the kind of changes that I think need to happen in this world are not necessarily going to come from politics. I think we need some huge things to happen there. We need a shift in consciousness. We also need a shift. If we don't have a shift in consciousness, well, we need a shift in how we do things. If the human race is going to survive, that's kind of my opinion. If the human race is not going to survive, well, that's neither here nor there. But it may still be our choice. It may not. It may be too late for that. We may be far beyond that. Death and life. Okay, I'm looking at my notes. I have a notebook. I could talk a little bit about my setup. There's a couple of lights. They're not video lights because I haven't wanted to put a huge amounts of dollars